back with another video. I want to correct the title of this video because hatred is a very strong word and it stirs up like a lot of conversation. But no, I don't hate poetry. It's just a label that I used for myself, mostly because I am intimidated by poetry. I'm a literature major, so I have formal education in poetry, which means I no longer have the excuse of saying I don't know how to read poetry. But it's still a genre that I don't naturally gravitate towards. That's not to say I don't read poetry. I do have poets who have influenced me and my writing throughout the years, and I think I've mentioned Conchitina Cruz on this channel. She is a local poet from the Philippines. The name of my channel is inspired by Emily Dickinson's poetry, so I can't say that poetry hasn't touched me as much as fiction did. I guess, in terms of frequency, I read more fiction, which is why I'm very grateful and I am excited for this video because I was given the opportunity by BOA Editions to talk about and review 5 unreleased poetry books. If you're not familiar with BOA Editions is a New York-based publisher of poetry in translation, and even short fiction, I believe. So thank you, BOA Editions. But the goal of this video really is to break those walls. I no longer want to be intimidated by poetry, and if there are times that I am lost in the text, then that's okay. But I have to just stop using hatred as like a form of protection. As mentioned, I will be reading 5 unreleased poetry books from BOA Editions in the next few days, and then I'll share with you my thoughts and my experiences and what I think about them. I will link the website of BOA Editions on my description box, so just in case you're really interested in the book and you're willing to support the author, be my guest. So the first book that I will read for the week is Charleen McClure's D-Isorientation, but with a hyphen on the letter I. Charleen McClure's D-Isorientation wanders the landscape of loss with an ethered eye and a clenched fist. Delving deep into personal hauntologies, McClure's speakers are dislocated. Their observations and interrogations are quietly desperate as they navigate history, relationships, and dig for their roots. The lexicon of McClure's poetry is one of intimacy and outrage, one that challenges the reader to consider their own belonging. Through bold lyric poems that beat with brutality, yet glow with softness, McClure's debut collection is a compass pointing to the reader towards reclamation. This is Charleen McClure's debut collection, and I know her work has been published in other publications before, but this is her first child, so let's get reading. As you can see, I'm reading on my tablet. These are digital review copies instead of the physical review copies. I can already tell within the first 3 poems that it's really about family and grief and domestic life, possibly about broken relationships. It's something that I have to take my time with to fully just grasp not only the meaning but the emotion that comes with every word, every break in line, every hyphen in place of a letter. But so far, language is beautiful. Form, it's free form, because sometimes form, for me, can be a distraction. I really love Charleen McClure's use of domestic imagery to portray the relationships within the home. There's a poem here that's called Mosquito, and they're really, really good lines. A balance that equals a hole in the stomach. An ounce of the thirst I once was, when my tongue searched for milk, stirring beneath the skin. Once latched on to my mother, I fattened till I grew a tooth, and she stopped nursing me. But look how I changed her with my hunger. Look how I charged her with my mouth. The most important part of the body is its pain. Can you taste her head shaking through me in what you swallow now? There's a violence in the relationship between the persona and her mother. And sometimes there's hardly a difference between violence and tenderness, nurture and torture, And it's wonderful to see like this author confuse you with those two concepts. because the child needs her mother's milk to survive, but at the same time it's a sort of charging towards her. She describes it as if she's gnashing her teeth on her mother's breasts, and it's beautiful. But yeah, these are just some insights that I got from this poem. And I am back, also with a new haircut. I cut my hair a couple of nights ago. The bangs are a little shorter than what I intended, but let's just pretend this is what it's supposed to look like. So I just finished Disorientation. It's a lot. It's really a lot. And I've had to go over the same poems quite a few times because there was just so much to grasp in a single poem. And I later learned that this was a really big ode to her mother. Of course, it's a lot of grief and motherhood and even just existing as a Black woman. Very beautifully said. I'm just gonna read the acknowledgements. The process is endless. The work is never done. But lately I think a poem is complete when it is shared. My thanks to you, dear reader. I really believe that as well. Like, any writer is never really content. If there was a way that I could edit post-published work until the end of time, and I would. But that's the beauty of publishing, right? It ends the process and you're forced to consider it a completed work, no matter what its form is. I really enjoyed this book of poetry. I am intimidated still. I think there is a lot of stuff that flew over my head, but it is beautiful and something that I would definitely go back to. This is good inspiration. Alright, so the next book of poetry that I'll be reading is called Sons of Salt by Yaccaira Salvatierra. And I have the press sheet on my laptop right here. Volcanic eruptions and waves collide in Yaccaira Salvatierra's explosive debut collection, Sons of Salt, which explores the duality of personal and political landscapes as well as legacies of violence within Mexican-American communities. Sons of Salt poignantly captures the experiences of mothers who battle for their sons' well-being, particularly when fathers are absent due to systemic oppressions. Salvatierra's verse breaks the bones of poetic form to bring attention to the failures of a Christian God who has categorically failed to protect his children and gives birth instead to a god of nature. Weaving self-made mythology, mourning, and maternal fear into visual and narrative poems, Salvatierra creates a collection that probes the deepest hurt to ensure the holiest redemption. Now, I can already tell this is gonna be another heavy and very painful book, and I'm excited also to read a debut collection from Yaccaira Salvatierra. And it says on her bio that aside from being a poet, she's also a translator and an educator for more than 20 years while raising her 2 sons as a single parent. These are very heavy topics, and a lot of these are coming from places of pain and suffering. And I'm very privileged to have a glimpse of their experiences and sort of understand where all this hurt is coming from. So come with me. Let's start reading once more. So I'm nearly halfway into Sons of Salt, and one thing I've noticed is that it plays a lot with form, but I like it. It's clear to me what the supposed intent of the play with form is. Of course, I can only assume, right? But it sends a clear message and it's fun. I'll see you in a bit. So I just came from a dinner with my cousins. My cats are right here next to me. Can you see them? There's one and there's 2. So yeah, I wanted to get some reading done before I snooze. So it's Monday tomorrow, which means it's another 5 days of me probably not reading. So this is me trying to make the most of the time I have left. I'm sorry, they're just so cute. I've noticed this collection of poems has this quintessential Latin American fantastical flair. Like, they're very subtly magic realist and very tragic and very family-centric. You know what I mean? If Mario Vargas Llosa and Gabriel Garcia Marquez wrote poetry, this is probably what it would look like. I like the repeated use of losing eyes in literal sense, but you never know if it's in a literal sense or if it's a metaphor for something. The way that it's used here as imagery. I really like it. Looks like cereal. How are you even supposed to eat this? I'll just dig in my spoon, right? Not sponsored. This is so good. I can't believe I'm I'm sobbing to a book of poetry. So I just finished it. Wow. Wow. I'm speechless. There's a lot to unpack here. One of my favorite things about the book was her repeated use of salt. Salt is used to preserve, right? Salt is also used to add taste. But the persona uses salt as well to withhold. Like the way the persona talks about her father's tongue in a jar of salt, like the way he was withholding communication to his sons. The persona is also dealing with a lot of pain from religion. I noticed she always refers to God as her mother's God rather than her own. And there's a lot of pain here that deals with so many things. Like, even as an immigrant from Mexico to the United States, also absent fathers, devout Catholic mothers, and how she had to stand in for her parents. She strives to be the same mother that she wanted for herself towards her sons, and how that's also, a struggle. It's not the easiest thing. And it's just so heavy, but also just so heartfelt, and you can really feel her pain just bleed through the pages. Wow, this is really good so far. I am so impressed by the quality of the poetry from BOA Editions. Alright, so the next book of poetry that we'll be reading is called Our Splendid Failure to Do the Impossible by Rebecca Lindenberg. Rebecca Lindenberg is a seasoned poet. I think she's released like 3 other collections. And I read that she's also an associate professor at the University of Cincinnati. Let's read the press sheet before I begin. So, living in landscapes of ruin and ruination, memory and problematic nostalgia, Rebecca Lindenberg's Our Splendid Failure to Do the Impossible, cute title, by the way, plumbs the depths of disruption, decay, and how we go on when the world stops cold. Inspired by the speaker's experiences of living with type 1 diabetes, the collection chronicles humanity's daily fight for survival in a world that's bent on destroying itself. Lindenberg centers love, self-acceptance, and intimacy as incomparable balms across great geographical and psychological distances, and asks the reader to do the impossible. Hope. I think this poetry collection will be up my alley because I know of someone who has passed due to diabetes. So the poetry collection will be out on October 1. I'm so grateful that I got to see it firsthand. I'll let you know what I think. I just spent the last few hours editing YouTube videos. My eyes are really tired. I thought I'd give them a rest by straining them even more. My goal for tonight is to finish Our Splendid Failure to Do the Impossible. And let's see if what I will do is also a splendid failure, because it seems what I'm about to do is also the impossible as the slowest reader in all of Southeast Asia. But you know what? I won't underestimate myself. There are times that I can read fast. Let's see. I did not finish the book last night. I fell asleep. I was reading one of the poems and I just woke up to the same page open. And one thing that I can say about this book is that it's not my favorite. Not to say that, many of the things that I've read were bad. In fact, this is the first collection of poetry where I've seen humor playing into a lot of the very heavy themes. I know this persona really dives deep into what it's like living with diabetes and just the experience of, having the illness. But there's this tone. It's when the persona kind of shrouds herself in self-deprecation and self-pity. I like one of the poems though. It's called Discourses of Diabetes Care. And the persona talks about how with the illness you lose the concept of control over your body. There's this dread of like death looming over you. And how she uses metaphors of soldiers and guns to sort of portray the body horror of living with diabetes. So that was interesting. I'll do some more reading, and I'll see by the end of this if I feel differently about this book. Okay, so I'm finally done with our splendid failure to do the impossible. And you know what I've noticed is that this poet would do such a great job at writing prose. Reading her poetry was a different experience from reading the past two collections, because in the past two collections there was value in the form and structure. With this one, this is what I'm saying. Form, for me, in my opinion, becomes a mere distraction. If you take the poem and you restructure it in such a way that it looks like a prose narrative, it wouldn't have changed anything. This is why I feel like the author would be a really great prose writer, or an essayist even, because I was just kind of annoyed by the form sometimes. It would just break the momentum for me instead of making it into a very seamless reading experience. There are really good insights. The author talks a lot about, guilt and really trying to get over her sense of denial over the disease. That's something that I'm fortunate enough to not have experienced, but I know of loved ones who have been through the same. It's just constant self-denial until it's in your face and you can no longer, look away from what's eating you whole. I'm still grateful that I got to read the book of poetry, but as I said, it's not a favorite. It was an interesting read, nonetheless. So let's move on to the fourth book of poetry from BOA Editions, and this one is called Yard Show by Janice and Harrington. This is from another Black author. Black history, cultural expression, and the natural world fuse in Janice and Harrington's Yard Show to investigate how Black Americans have shaped a sense of belonging and place within the Midwestern United States, as seen through the documentation of objects found within yard shows. This collection of descriptive, lyrical, and experimental poems speaks to the Black American imagination in all its multiplicity. Harrington's speaker is a chronicler of yesterdays, using the events of the past to center and advocate for a future that celebrates pleasure and self-fulfillment within Black communities. So this book of poetry is Janice Ann Harrington's fourth poetry collection, and she's an award-winning writer. This is very interesting for me because I don't hear a lot about the Midwest, or at least I haven't in a long time. So coming from a Black American writer would be a very interesting perspective. I'm looking forward to that, and let's get reading. I'm reading one of the poems entitled Burn, and I already love that there's so much Midwest imagery. Like there's a coyote mentioned, the prairie, and barbed wire. Like these are such strong images. Like if you just said these words, I know where the poem is set. And that's what I love about poetry. It's quick. It brings you to a place quick enough for you to have like a good idea of where and when you're at. I just got home from work and I am determined to finish Yard Show tonight. And so far, I really like this collection. I really love how the persona used different images of yard shows, in that some yards, especially the Black communities in the Midwest, are seen as filthy and disorganized and messy, and then we have these very white communities where the architecture is more sophisticated, cleaner, and just more aesthetically pleasing. That's repeated throughout the entire collection, and I'm really enjoying it so far. There's a poem here that's called Essay on the Modification of Clouds, and I have to read this. In the movie, Moses stands beside the Israelites. A green-fingered cloud comes out of the night. O children, who does death pass over? Maybe our losses are insubstantial vapor. Adrift, harried by winds, the past evaporates, the future condenses. After her father's death, she studied the clouds, finding in their shape lilies, a running deer, a candle flame, but nothing she would call daddy. Noctilucent, meaning night lace or night cloud, meaning moonlight is sweetest when lapped from a black woman's neck. Meteorological studies reveal that memories are cloud formations, disruptions of air patterns, coagulations of mist, wind currents. I really envy these kinds of poets. Like just the lyricism in their language and just how coherent all the imagery is. Like using a biblical reference of the cloud passing over the Israelites to comparing that to her grief about her father, looking for her father in the clouds, the way God guided the Israelites as a pillar of clouds. Oh, how I wish I could write like this. That was such a delightful read. I mean, of course, the poetry collection was very political and heavy as well, but I don't know, I felt really good after. It's not the, heart-wrenching kind of sadness. I do feel a slight melancholy, but it's not as heartbreaking as the first two poetry collections, which is good because I think if my heart broke one more time, I might have to check in myself into a psych ward. That was really good. I love how intentional her references are. Like, you'll see James Baldwin and Martin Luther King Jr., even Barth is in there. These are the kind of poems that I think I would have enjoyed a lot in college, reading them through different lenses, close reading them, picking them apart, and they weren't even difficult to read as well. I really, really liked this collection. I really appreciated how the poet doesn't bar you from the experience. It's crystal clear. I feel like what I often stumble upon when reading poetry is this very big wall that only the smartest of poetry enthusiasts could break. But for this poetry collection, I feel at peace. I feel as calm as a river. And I like feeling this way after reading something. I do love a good cry. I do love angst every now and then. But also, this is very refreshing, just smiling after reading something. Not everything that I read was all sunshine and rainbows, but it was a very coherent collection with a satisfying conclusion. So let us move on to the very last poetry collection, and I'm very excited about this one because I think I've read many of these poems already. So one of the poems in this collection I have a tattoo of. Joseph Fasano is one of my favorite poets of all time. I don't think I've mentioned him on this channel, but I am so happy to be able to read this collection before it's out. It's, it's like a bragging right of mine. Like, I got to read one of my favorite poets' poetry collection for it's released into the world. So it's called The Last Song of the World. So Joseph Fasano's The Last Song of the World delves into the chaos of the modern world and searches for resilience in the face of environmental and societal devastation. Dripping with images of ancient ruins and mythological figures, these poems serve as vignettes of fatherhood, love, and desire against the backdrop of apocalyptic events. Through the documentation of ongoing violence and natural phenomena, Fasano depicts the ever-present anxieties of parenting with concision and compassion. The Last Song of the World is a love letter to the world that could be, a world as tender as it is bold, as loving as it is brutal, as beautiful as it is horrendous. I am psyched. I'm so psyched. I think you can see it in my face how psyched I am to read this poetry collection. Finally, it's worth the wait. I will get back to you on my thoughts and I'll see you later. And it's the very first poem. Sudden Hymn in Winter. What if after years of trial, a love should come and lay a hand upon you and say, this late, your life is not a crime. I'm not about to sob again in front of the camera. But yeah, thank you, Joseph, for writing this, really. I don't know how many lives you've saved. but thank you. There's a poem in this collection. It's called Pieta, and I gasped at how beautiful it is. I'm gonna read it. All his life he'd wearied her with trials. The hours he made her chase him through the temple. The times she let him walk out through the wilderness. The times he made her lift his cross, his youth. But all of it has come to this stillness. Waken, she wants to tell him, waken. And when she wipes his hair from off his face of changes, when she leans down to his scent of groves and soldiers, she whispers him, in soft words earth has earned her, the one prayer of a queen, a love, a mother. Let me once more carry it for you. Oh my goodness. Obviously, of course, the poem is, referencing Mother Mary and Jesus, throughout his youth until the day of his death on the cross. And it's so universal. Like, even the Son of God, had this beautiful experience of, a mother's love and just the helplessness of it, but also just the surrender. I'm so speechless. This is so beautiful. Like, one thing that I really, really love about Joseph Fasano's poetry is that it's accessible. Like, anyone can read it. Like, he's an educator as well. He's a teacher, and he teaches kids how to read poetry. So kids can read his poetry, but it doesn't compromise or sacrifice quality and depth. They're just beautiful. Like, they're timeless poems that you can read or recite out loud. Either way, it's just like Emily Dickinson's poetry. Very simple, very clear cut, like a diamond. It's just see-through, transparent, and sharp-edged. Yeah. I don't even want to finish this book because there's so many gems in here. And I really think everyone should read this book of poetry at least once in their lives. I do have to finish this video, so I'll try to finish the book tonight and then give you my final thoughts. And I am done. I finally finished Joseph Fasano's The Last Song of the World. Wow, I really loved it. I mean, I wasn't surprised that I loved it. A lot of these poems reminded me of the movie The Road by Cormac McCarthy, because a lot of the poems depict apocalyptic scenarios, and a father and son relationship are also central to many of the poems, and it just gets to the heart. This poetry collection is just a lot of love and loneliness, and also navigating a life where you have mental illness and trying to be there for the people you love despite that. It's an odyssey of some sort. I mean, I think it was structured that way, in which there's a journey that the hero goes through, and it felt like I read a novel. It felt like I read a novel of a hero's journey. I really loved that. One other poem that I really liked, aside from Pieta, is called Burial. I think it's the shortest one in the collection, and I just had to pause for a bit and stare at the ceiling because it's so brilliant. I'm gonna read it. Burial. In one moment, the earth holds you closer. The night took a lifetime to. What? That's so true, because sometimes with the ones we love, it's going to be too late. And that's a wake-up call. So that was a really beautiful poem. It really had me just thinking about my life for a little bit. And another one that I really liked as well is a poem called Spring, after Carl Jung, I believe. So this is a very hopeful poem that just lifted my spirits. You have come this far through darkness. Rest now in the lemon scent of the river. Lie down with the briars in your hair. Listen. The wind on the far shore, stunned as the first touch of a lover. Wherever your fear is, your terror, your life has always been there. That just encapsulates Joseph Fasano's style and skill as a poet. He really can move you through his poetry in just one reading of it. You'll just read it once and you'll be changed for good. That wraps up all the 5 books that I had the honor of reading before they were released. And yes, as mentioned, also by this time 2 of the poetry collections have already been out because I was taking my time with them. And still, I'm very grateful for BOA Editions. I will link all the books in my description box, whether they're already out or for pre-order. They're all in there. So that's it. One thing that I wanted to mention before I go is that I've been thinking of creating a Goodreads account or a Storygraph account. I've had a Goodreads account before, but I don't know. I think I deleted it because I felt like I was reading for the sake of ticking boxes on Goodreads. But I do want to bring it back so that I could properly document all the books that I've been reading recently and for the year. If you guys have any suggestions on whether I should go with Goodreads or with Storygraph, give me a study case on which platform is better and I will make one soon. So yeah, that is it. Thank you for being here. I'm grateful once again for everyone who has commented and subscribed and just shared any of my videos. And I will see you in the next one.